Welcome to The Long Hot Marriage. I'm pleased and a little excited to be able to talk to our author here, Todd Creager, who is the author of this new book called The Long Hot Marriage. And he is a licensed marriage and sex therapist practicing out of Orange County for the last 27 years, so he really knows what he's talking about. Todd, welcome. It's really nice to have you here. I've got so many questions, but let me just start by asking you, what prompted you to write this book?
Well, I'll tell you, this is something that I've been thinking about for quite a while. I've been a marriage therapist, like you said, for 27 years, and constantly people come in and they feel like marriage means the end of sexuality, that once you get married, eventually sex ends. It's a story we've been told for many years. As a matter of fact, when I told my brother the name of my upcoming book was The Long Hot Marriage, he said to me, "Oh, does it start out once upon a time?" So, you know, that's the prevailing attitude. And I have found with hundreds, maybe thousands of couples that I've helped, that that is just not the case. That the problem is that we need to learn new things. We need new role models, which we don't have.
Well, so where does that idea come from? Why does it fall apart in marriages so routinely that you had to write a book about it?
Well, you know, this is not easy to do. We have parents and grandparents who have not had passionate, alive marriages. I mean, my parents were wonderful, but I can't say that they had these passionate, alive marriage, and that's true for just about all of us. So we haven't seen it, heard it, smelled it, tasted it. It's not something we've experienced. So how could we then do it ourselves? It's impossible unless we learn new things, unless you find new ways. And a lot of times I call myself not much as a therapist, but more of a tour guide, and I take couples on an interpersonal safari, and they learn new things. It's not so much what we're doing or saying or thinking that's the problem, it's what we haven't done yet, it's what we haven't thought yet, and it's what we haven't said yet. So once you start thinking about it like that, now there's hope where before there was no hope.
Now, so I know that John Gray made some very positive comments about your book. Do you think that integral to this is a communications difference between men and women?
Definitely is part of it. I mean, there are differences with men and women. John Gray, for example, has done some research on brain and stress hormones. There are definitely physiological differences. For example, some people feel that women, their health improves, their oxytocin levels increase when they share feelings and they give and receive feelings. Well, that's not necessarily true for men. So men aren't necessarily hormonally driven to share feelings. They might be more hormonally driven to watch a Laker game or play sports or make $1 million. But in order to have a healthy marriage, both people's energy has to be up. So the male, for example, really does need to learn how to share feelings, even if they don't do it a majority of the time, so that they raise their woman's oxytocin level. It's just one way to think about it. So there are definitely those differences in men and women, but I don't think that's the only thing, the only obstacle. I think that there's just cultural limitations, the limitations of our family. I really think that the main problem is that when it comes to relationships, we are at the earliest stages of evolution. You know, sort of like technology. You know, we're improving so quickly, and when it comes to relationships, we're still kind of like Neanderthalish. You know, fear runs the show, reactivity. We react to each other, and we haven't learned how to develop the emotional muscle it takes to connect and have a passionate, long marriage. And we could do that.
That's actually a very interesting point, because the origins of marriage aren't this love thing that we're very, in a contemporary society, attached to.
That's right.
That is a fairly new sort of premise. So you're talking about the differences in men and women, and we really are talking about heterosexual relationships here. Since men are sort of sports-oriented, why don't they just think of marriage as a team sport?
I think that's great. I think I'll use it. I'm going to write that down. No, I do think that we have to think about that if you look at a sports analogy, all team members have to work together, and that just like a couple, and a lot of times in order for a team to work, you actually have to do things that aren't your strength. And with couples, a lot of times people tend to give from their strength, and that's all great, but oftentimes what's missing is our undeveloped areas are the problem. For example, you have a man who's great around the house, fixes around the house, does great things, maybe even is a good cook, but Maybe in order for the wife to feel nourished and alive, she needs him to sit still for 10 minutes and be interested in her. Maybe he's not very good at that. So he has to learn how to do those things even if it's not part of his natural skill.
I see. So
it's a team sport, like you say.
What's the first, my first question is, what's the big mistake or the big obstacle that happens in a marriage that derails it?
Well, that's a great question. I think in a nutshell, it's we're waiting for the other partner to change. If the other partner changes, then I'm fine. And that really isn't it. We're all very powerful. We're very, very powerful people. And we need to be able to look at where our power is. And it's really in how we think and how we behave and how we talk. So for example, even in thinking, we need to be able to be aware of that. How I think about my partner will affect my partner. It will bring out more of what I want from my partner or less of what I want from my partner. My thinking is not just this passive thing. So if I'm thinking of my partner, for example, as my enemy, she's a threat, and a lot of men do. If we are honest with each other, when the woman walks in the room, we might feel like, maybe not in the very beginning of a relationship, but as time goes on and there's problems, we might automatically see that person is going to take away my confidence or self-esteem, is going to judge me, and we see our partner as an enemy. We will probably treat that person so that they become more and more of an enemy. So it's really important to be aware of how we think, and I want to think the best of you, even if there's no history to back that up, because my thinking affects your behavior. So basically, the premise, and that's why it's such a good question, is that I can't wait for my partner to change. What am I thinking? If there's a problem here, there's something I'm doing that's to maintain the problem. Even if I feel like 98% of the problem is hers, I better look for my 2%. I'm doing something to maintain the problem. I have to do something different, or at least I have to think something different.
So it's a little bit like mirror, mirror on the wall.
Yes, we're constantly affecting other people. Like the common, the mainstream law of attraction concepts that are going around. We actually attract things from other people. And I've gone into businesses and done some consulting work similarly with bosses who are, they want their employees to work well, and yet they see their employees as a loser. It just doesn't work. So partners have to be really aware of how, if I'm judging my partner all the time in my head, I'm probably bringing out more of the very thing I don't want from my partner. So yes, definitely mirror, mirror on the wall.
Well, there's some more meaty things that we want to get into here, and we want to have the time to do it. So we're going to take a little break here and come back to part 2 and get into some more really good, hot, sexy questions about marriage. So come back, join us in part 2. And thank you very much, Todd Creager. See you in a little bit.
Thank you.